Welcome to the Point. In Washington and in Lansing, the conversation about some type of COVID relief continues, while at the same time the calls for unity and bipartisanship in many cases are going unheeded. Here in Michigan, the governor has asked for more than $5 billion in COVID relief. Republicans have offered up about $3.5 billion. The difference, they say, is that their plan deals only with COVID relief, while they say the governor's plan spends on projects beyond the scope of the pandemic. Democrats say the Republican leadership should have a straight up or down vote on the governor's plan, though that seems unlikely. We talked to Muskegon Democratic Representative Terry Sabo about that and more. Representative, earlier in the week, you sent out a release that said you would like to see an up or down vote on the governor's plan, $5 billion plus, most all of that is federal money, in COVID relief. So let's first talk a little bit about what that plan would do and why you think that's a good idea.
Well, I think it really it covers a lot of areas, and specifically for vaccine distribution. To ramp that up even further, to help with some of our landlord-tenant issues that we have out there. Also for our schools are hurting because of the situation that they're in, and having to provide a lot of other services to our students, as well as some food assistance programs as well. And so it's areas that I really believe that could be very beneficial to a lot of folks here in Michigan. For me specifically, right back in the greater Muskegon area. And to have to tie bar something like this relief funding for these various programs to a bill that is going to, take away a lot of the powers of our Department of Health and Human Services departments, as well as, having it so that kids can go back to school. To go back and play not only in school, but also for sports. I have a problem with that. If the funding is needed, which I believe it is, then we shouldn't be tie barring it to other things, such as, going back to play sports.
I want to examine that a little more closely. That's the Republican plan, which we'll also be discussing on this program. But I want to talk to you first of all about the need. Now, again, reiterating that most of this money is from the federal government and needs to be allocated by the legislature. And you highlighted some of the things that it could be used for. When you think about your district in the Muskegon area, what are the most pertinent needs? Obviously, you mentioned the landlord-tenant items. You talked about, of course, vaccine for everybody is a big issue, but also food assistance. Are those some of the real major points specific to your district?
Yeah, for me, it is. It's all about the vaccines, getting shots in the arms to really slow down this virus. But I think also for small businesses, government came in and mandated that many of these small businesses shut down. And because of that, I really believe that government should be stepping back in to help these small businesses get through this time. So we've now opened things back up to a certain degree. I say we, meaning the state and the Department of Health and Human Services. But we need to continue to provide assistance to them until they can get back on their feet to get through, what has been a very, very difficult time period.
When you think about the businesses in your area, and obviously every representative has restaurants that have been negatively impacted, or performance venues, or bowling alleys, or take your pick. But I mean, those are some of the areas that have been closed down, arguably the hardest or longest. What is the general economic health in your district, maybe relative to other areas, or maybe there isn't a comparison, but Muskegon, previous to this pandemic, had been showing really remarkable growth and redevelopment. I mean, you and I have had the conversation about downtown was unrecognizable to me when I came up to see you one day, because so many things had changed, so many buildings had been either repurposed or rebuilt and remodeled. What does it look like there?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Rick. It is very important for the greater Muskegon area to get back to some sense of normalcy. Now, we have to remember that we've lost 15,000 people to this virus in the state of Michigan. But now at the same time, it's been very difficult on the community that I represent a community that has really based a lot of its economic standing on hospitality industry, tourism industry. Those things are just not happening right now. And even with the bars and restaurants opening back up, it still has that 25% capacity, and that makes it very difficult. But another thing to remember is that many people just don't feel comfortable going back out yet. So it's been a big hit on that industry, and we've got to do all we can to help.
When you think about what's going on in your area, and we talked about some of that development, we're looking at a rollout here on vaccines that the state estimates maybe 6-7 months before we get to herd immunity if we do it at 50,000 people a day. I mean, that's still a long time, and that takes us all the way through summer. And look, for a lakeshore community, I don't have to explain to you how important summer is. So this is going to be an ongoing problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. And, as far as the vaccines go, we've had some problems as a state getting an adequate number of vaccines coming from the federal level. But then we've also had, the growing pains of trying to figure out a plan to get them distributed. And I think our local officials are working hard on that. I really believe that they are. And it's something that we're all going to have to work together on in trying to get this to happen in a smooth way, to get these shots in the arms, because ultimately that's what's going to really save us all, not only save our lives, but save the economy as well, is to rid ourselves of this virus.
I want to go back to the original part of our conversation and talking about the governor's plan. It's not the only plan that's out there. The Republicans have come up with their plan, and you referenced that. The Republican plan would put 3 point something billion in circulation out there, but would hold back some of the money based on the ability to let local school districts make decisions about things like sports, which has become a really hot button item. And you said you don't think that's a good idea, but let's talk about the idea that Republicans are bridling a bit under what they think has been almost a year long of the legislature being put on the sideline. Give me your take on that, and do you at all understand where they're coming from, having, from their perspective, been left out of the decision-making process?
Well, I strongly disagree. Really, the legislature has had the opportunity to be a part of the process. The legislature has failed to become a part of the process on their own account, because bills can be introduced at any time. This is a legislature that is led by Republicans in the House and the Senate. They can be introducing bills again at any time to move forward, and that has not happened. There has been really no response and no plan for COVID coming from the legislature at all. There was a few bills that were introduced around the election time, but those, for the most part, they either did not go anywhere or they did nothing but codify some of the orders that the governor had in place. So, those are things that I think that we all have to remember and recognize as far as what some of the hurdles that we've had as a legislature. Now, as far as this appropriations plan, I am not in favor of it, because what it boils down to, Rick, is that it feels like we're playing politics again with over a COVID virus, and with people dying and getting sick, and really the economy tanking. And we really should be at a time when we really should be working together to try to figure this out for the benefit of every single person here in Michigan and every single business. We're not doing that. I mean, we criticize the governor for doing one thing, but then we as a legislature turn around and do the same thing. And, that, to me, that's just not the way I want to play. We need to sat down at the table and figure some of these things out. And we do that by communicating with each other and some give and take with each other.
Is there an opportunity to do that? That's a conversation that I've had with the Senate Majority Leader. I had briefly with the new Speaker of the House. I've obviously talked to the governor about it, and everybody gives it a pretty good game when it comes to talking, but we're coming up now on, I guess, almost a year since the first cases were diagnosed here in the state of Michigan. And while I've heard talk of everybody coming to the table, haven't seen much evidence of that.
No, I agree. And that's very unfortunate for the people of Michigan to see this happening with their state government. It's to me, it's just uncalled for. And you're not going to get any resolution until you actually communicate and you truly seek to find some kind of common ground. Because, Rick, if you and I are negotiating something and I ask you to come and see things my way, and you don't do that, then I can't blame you for not negotiating. And because what it is, you just don't agree with me. And we're not seeking that common ground. So, negotiation is a two-way street, not a one-way street.
And finally, talking about your call for this to come to a straight up or down vote, given the dynamics that are in the House and the Senate right now, and given the majority Republican control, even if they were to bring it up for a straight up or down vote, what are the odds that you would get enough defections from Republicans to make that a reality?
I doubt there would be very many at all. And that's just, again, I just go back to what I've been saying. It's very unfortunate. We need to be finding solutions, not playing politics right now.
Is there any, and I'm adding this on because you kind of spurred a question there, is there any attempt on the part of Democrats and Republicans, be it the leadership or just working groups, that are trying to come up with a compromise on these two plans?
I think that I can only speak from what I've seen personally, and I really believe that and as far as the House Democrat side, our leader Donald Lisinski has definitely left the door open for any kind of discussions as how we would move forward and how we would figure some of these things out. But it's just not happening. We just don't get that courtesy. It just feels like we are in just a very solid political mode right now, and that's where it's going to stand.
When we come back, a Republican take on COVID relief on the state level that is considerably different than that of the Democrats. It's next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Republicans and Democrats agree that more COVID relief is needed. They just don't agree on how much and where it should be allocated. Freshman Republican legislator Brian Posthumus talks about the GOP perspective. Representative, the governor has asked the legislature to approve more than $5 billion in COVID funding. Much of that is federal money. There is some state component to that, but the Republicans in the legislature have come up with a different plan using some of the same money, I presume. So can you tell me what that is and what the differences are between what the governor has proposed and what you are looking at now in the State House?
Absolutely. I appreciate you for having me on. The biggest difference between our plan and the governor's plan is that we're specifically targeting the funds where it needs to go, helping neighborhood job providers and helping to work toward getting kids back in school and back on the playing fields.
So there's a difference in the dollar amount. To talk a little bit about that.
The difference in the dollar amount is specifically because we are working a targeted effort to those that are most affected by COVID. There aren't any corporate handouts. There aren't any pet projects in it like the governor's plan has. Ours is specifically geared toward helping those that need it the most.
Then identify some of those corporate handouts or pet projects that you talk about, because in looking at the governor's plan, I mean, as she describes it, this is all COVID related. What do you see in there that is not?
Well, that's what we'll have. I'm going to let the chairperson of Appropriations Committee talk about that. That's kind of his role in all of this. He's the one that's appropriating the funds where they need to go. So that we'll let that go with him.
What is the contingency in the Republican plan that talks about returning some of the responsibility for decision making surrounding schools and high school sports? What is that component and how would that work?
I'm sorry, are you asking about how I presume you're talking about us specifically giving the authority to make those decisions to the local communities, right? Is that what you're asking?
Right.
Yeah. So our view is that over the last year of the pandemic, the governor has painted the state with a broad brush. And our view is that those closest to the communities are better positioned to make those decisions and make those determinations. And so we are allocating that power to allocating that decision-making authority to the local communities and the counties.
The governor has described withholding funds, if in fact funds were being withheld, as cruel if you were going to try to do that. Is changing that authority something that you, as a member, would be inclined to hold up this package, your package or hers, until that authority is changed?
Look, Chairman Albert has been very clear. We're not withholding any funds. The governor is very good at manipulating the population and misleading the population. We're not withholding any funds. We are specifically allocating funds where they need to go and when they need to go there. We're not just going to hand over a blank check to an administration that has bungled the unemployment agency, bungled vaccines, and kept our students out of schools. We're not going to hand over a blank check that way.
So what you're saying is that, and I want to be very clear about this, is the package that Republicans have proposed, the dollars that you are talking about, is that contingent on changing the authority for those schools that you just described?
Some aspects of our appropriations are contingent on ensuring that they're handled the right way. Like I said, we're not writing her a blank check. We are going to make sure that funds are administered properly and effectively.
Representative Sabo was on earlier in this program, and he said he thinks this feels like it's all political, and that the program that you're talking about is playing games with some of this money. Now, I know that's not your point of view, but is that the feeling within the legislature from the standpoint that both Republicans and Democrats think the other side is playing politics?
I don't think it's political. I think there's different concepts of who should handle the decisions. Our view is that it should be handled by those closest to those that are impacted by it.
Well, let's talk about who else should be handling this. Republicans in the legislature, and I think even you in your campaign talked about the fact that they feel like they've been set aside, that they've been out of the decision-making process. Is there any progress? Is there any conversation at the leadership or other levels that is a conversation that is getting the administration and the legislature closer to talking about some of these decisions and making them jointly?
Gosh, I hope so. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like that's the case. I mean, the legislature still isn't privy to the information with regard to how many deaths are taking place in nursing homes. They're not sharing that information with us. I have an ad committee hearing later on this afternoon, and we invited MDARD over to that, and they'll be in attendance. But we invited MDHHS to the committee hearing, and they refused. And that's just the overall aspect of how the administration is treating the legislature right now, and has been treating the legislature for the past year.
Well, what is the solution from your standpoint? I mean, how do you get, if you don't have, how do you get a seat at the table, and what is the legislature prepared to do other than over in the Senate? They held up 13 appointments to boards and commissions, but beyond that, are you prepared? What are you prepared to do in order to try to get that seat at the table?
The most important thing that can be done is for the people in my district, the people in the state of Michigan, to call the governor's office and let her know, like, look, we need our children back in school. We need our children back playing sports. We need to get back to where we can function as a society again. Opening up restaurants 25% isn't going to cut it. We need those people to have those conversations with the governor's office, so she knows that people are feeling this.
Well, let's be clear too about this. You need kids to go back to school. There are a lot of school districts that are back in person school, either fully, as my school district is, or in a hybrid form. What more do you want to see done on that front?
I want to, excuse me, I want to see, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of schools that have been 5-day in-person schooling all year. There's a lot of schools that have been that way. And what we found, what we see from that is that the percentage of children that are getting COVID or having a challenge with that is exceptionally low. And so the detrimental effect of keeping these children out of in-person learning, especially in the rural communities or in the inner city communities where access to broadband internet isn't necessarily something that's at your fingertips, these children are falling behind. And so that's why our appropriations committee has allocated an additional $250 per student for schools that open up to 5-day per week in-person schooling. That's what I want to see. I want to see every school that their local communities deem that it's safe, open for 5-day instruction with the option of virtual school for those parents that don't feel comfortable sending their kids.
You also talked about restaurants at 25%, and I've talked to any number of restaurant owners who completely agree that that isn't enough to keep them afloat. On the other hand,
going out of business more slowly.
The other hand, we know that there are new strains of this virus that have been identified in the state, and it would appear that many of the doctors and scientists that are involved in this are not exactly sure just how resistant some of those strains may be, even to the vaccines that we have now. So, knowing all of that, would it be prudent to further open up restaurants and places where people could be in close proximity, or is that something that you're concerned about?
What isn't prudent is keeping the servers from being able to earn a living and provide for their families. What isn't prudent is putting these business owners in a position where they are going to go out of business. What isn't prudent is seeing these business owners and these job providers, even though they don't have any income, coming into the business, supporting their employees out of their pockets with revenue that they're not seeing in their business. So what we need to be doing is opening up our economy. We've known for a long time that these strains are going to mutate. That's what they do. That's how it works. It should come to no surprise to anybody that there's multiple strains out there. We have to be vigilant. We have to take those into account. We have to address them, and we need to continue to practice social distancing and move forward safely.
And finally, going back to our original conversation, there is money that the state has access to that can be allocated to go towards some of the problems created by the pandemic and some of the subsequent problems created by an economy that was shut down in large part early in the spring and is more fully open now, but as you point out, not completely open now. Either your plan, being the Republicans' plan, or the governor's plan, will one of those get passed? And if so, how long will that take?
I think there's going to be some negotiating with regard to what the final product looks like. I don't know that it's going to be exactly the same as our plan in the House right now, nor will it probably be actually I can tell you it won't be the plan that the governor has put forward. But there will be some negotiating. What that final product looks like, I don't know. The House is looking to get our appropriations bill passed. Hopefully hopefully this week. Obviously, I can't say that for sure, but that's what we're looking at doing.
On Thursday, the Republican-led House did pass their version of COVID relief. It now heads to the Senate, with Democrats saying it leaves too much money on the table. We'll be right there. In Washington and in Lansing, COVID relief is moving forward. Whether there will be any bipartisan cooperation in that effort is something we'll be watching closely. And we'll see you next week. To the Point.